walls are closing in. They've got him this time. He's definitely going to prison. There's no escape, and we might even put him in pretrial detention at this time with no bail because of, 2 more weeks blowing on. We've heard this story before. We'll actually be talking about the latest indictment, which could bring the total up to 70 plus for felonies at this point, what this means, and what is happening next in the investigation into the incitement of the January 6th insurrection. Plus, I've got a couple of lengthy Twitter posts here that may be explaining some of the timeline of this. So, well, we're going to be spending most of the show going over this, but there is some other news that's going on here as well. In other news, if we actually do get to some of the other news at this point, Greg Abbott is in the hot seat again after sending another busload of migrants to Los Angeles, with a whistleblower from the Texas State Patrol now coming out and saying that they were told to push the migrants into the river. So we'll go over some of that, what's happening at the border, and where we go from there. Cornel West appears on CNN, refusing to accept the narrative on Ukraine, and Anderson Cooper gets visibly angry, and the Biden letter has reached enough volume to where at least some of the non-mainstream outlets are starting to cover it because, well, we talked about it when I got the email and then when Styx got the email, but yeah, they're basically violating the Hatch Act right from your email, and it is going to be all of this and more. They've got him this time. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary, or as this show is going to be, the Donald Trump They've Got Him This Time stream. My name is Jay Edgar. This is your evening news, and we have got a big slate of things to go over here today. We will be talking about the Georgia 5th Circuit as well, and Arizona doing some investigation into fake electors as well, because, and mostly this got on here because number one, I wanted to talk about it yesterday, but number two, and the big one with that, is that now Michigan has filed actual felony indictments against everybody who was involved with the fake electors scheme. So they're saying here, if it feels like the departments of justice, both on the state and federal level, are going after anybody who supported Trump, well, I can kind of see where you're coming from with that. I'm not going to come out and say that they're doing it specifically to anybody who wore a red hat, but I mean, statistics are the statistics, and that's what we're going to see here. So we've got a lot to go over here today. We're going to get into it fairly shortly here in just a second. So strap yourselves in, grab yourself some dinner, get some friends in here, share out the stream. That really helps me out on all the platforms: YouTube, DLive, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and Rumble. Go put us out there on all the streams. Oh, we're on Kick too, but we don't really get a lot of listening in there. But it's a lot easier to set up a Kick stream than it is to set up a Odyssey stream. So that's why Odyssey is out and Kick is in. Go check us out. If you can't catch us live for the entire show, you can catch us on the audio platforms over on Spotify, Contemporary with Jay Edgar. Go check that out. Or on the replays, YouTube, Rumble. Where else is the replay? Odyssey, that's the other big one there. Go check that out. I do this every day and I forget about that. Go check us out on all of those, or again, over on Spotify as well. And we're going to get right into it. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, Silent Caster, Clown World Chronicles with Papa Palpatine, and Overruled with KTZed. Go check out all that great programming as we aim to bring you a better news and culture experience from the common man for the common man. Stop getting your news from people who wear suits that cost more than your houses, and start getting your news from people who are just like you. Live chat will be up, and we will react to live chat throughout the stream, so if you've got something to say on the topic at hand, make sure that you get it in there, because we want to hear from you over here on Contemporary, definitely, and everything is welcome. Some things we'll gloss over just because of YouTube censorship. And let's get into it. We're going to start with finance before we get into the big Trump news of the day. But we're going to fly through it because we've got a lot to go over here. All right, let's see what we've got here. On the Dow spent the day up with the futures holding steady across right now. It took a spike at the beginning of trading and stayed up steady by mid-morning on to the end of trading there. The Dow ending up 34,951.93. Edging ever closer to that 35,000 mark. Will Biden actually get a record? Again, we will see what happens with that and where that goes. They did hit a 52-week high today to 34,986.36. So that is where they're at with that. That is up, by the way, 366.58 points, or 1.06% on trading on the day. Looking at your Bitcoin, that went in the opposite direction. Bitcoin fell today about $300 US, so kind of going in the opposite direction of where the Dow is going. The Bitcoin ending at $29,788 US and 10 US cents. That is down $354 US and 90 US cents, or approximately 1.18%, with a roller coaster going throughout the day. And luckily, it didn't stop at the lowest point that it's been at. It didn't even stop at the second lowest point that it's been at throughout the day, but it's been struggling throughout the day. So that's what we see on your Bitcoin. We will alert you. I will alert you if we get to a point where the Bitcoin is on sale. That is, of course, getting down under that sub 20,000 mark. Your gas prices using the Madison area as our benchmark. The benchmark that we've been using since this channel started. Looks like we're going to see some reprieve again. 330 is holding steady at a couple of these stations out on the east side of Madison, but it looks like 320 is starting to become the average around the Madison area again, with an outlier of 316. 340 on the Shell entering the Isthmus, 316 on the Isthmus, and 316 at the BP entering. So it looks like on the average it is going to start coming down. Remember, these are not your local gas prices. Always check your local listings to see where your local gas prices are, but watching the pattern and seeing, and again, now me living far away from the Madison area, I do see where the averages change and where our average is pegged more or less to what the Madison average is. So your average is more than likely going to be pegged about the same way. We will continue to use the same market to make a comparison day over day and see where the gas prices are going. Let's grab our finance report for the day, coming to us from CNBC. Maybe. Apparently they don't want to take that live counter away there. Dow pops more. All right, give us a second. They've changed the way they do things at CNBC. There's our continue without supporting. Dow pops more than 300 points for 7th straight positive day, longest winning streak since 2021. From Brian Evans and Samantha Subin. The Dow was higher Tuesday as traders digested better than expected corporate earnings. The Dow added 366.58 points, or 1.06%, to close at 34,951.93. The Nasdaq climbed 0.76 to finish the session at 14,353.64, while the S&P gained 0.71 to end at 45,54.98. The Dow notched its 7th straight day of gains and its longest winning streak since March 2021. All three major averages had their highest closes since April of 2022. Bank of America reported better than expected earnings for the second quarter thanks to higher interest rates. Bank of New York Mellon's earnings also exceeded expectations. Shares of both banks gained more than 4%. Morgan Stanley added 6.4% after a beat on both revenue and adjusted earnings per share, driven by record revenue. In its wealth management segment, PNC Financial advanced 2.5% on the back of a mixed second quarter number. J.B. Hunt is slated to report after the bell. Overall, the earnings season is off to a strong start. Of the S&P 500 that have reported 84% exceeded profit estimates, according to FactSet. Meanwhile, investors are seemingly shaking off soft data from the Commerce Department out Tuesday. Advanced retail sales ticked up 0.2% month over month in June, while economists polled by Dow Jones forecasted a 0.5% increase. That's because people can't afford to buy shit. We'll talk about that. I've got it might not archive, but when we talk about our layoffs report, we'll be talking about frivolous money and spending and what goes on there. Americans have gotten relief at the gas pump, but also don't have an excessive demand for consumer goods, said David Russell, Vice President of Market Intelligence at TradeStation. This is modestly positive news for investors worried that the Fed's needing to hike after July. Goldilocks marches on. So that is where our markets are going. Our layoffs report today coming from TechCrunch. Cameo announces more layoffs as celebrity greeting market shrinks from Harry Weber. Cameo, a website for ordering video greetings from celebrities, is downsizing again. The Chicago startup, which was valued at more than $1 billion in 2021, intends to lay off 80 workers. Reached by TechCrunch, CEO Steve Galanis confirmed that Cameo decided to reduce the size of our team, but the executive did not acknowledge the number of jobs the firm would eliminate. The information first reported the news. The move reportedly leaves Cameo with fewer than 50 employees, a major shift from the nearly 400 staffers Galanis said the firm had back when business was really booming. In May of 2022, Cameo laid off 87 workers. At the time, Galanis said in a statement that Cameo had hired a lot of people quickly, so it could support both fan and talent demand during the pandemic lockdowns. Then the market rapidly changed, Galanis added. The CEO called the decision a course correction so the firm could regain focus, as well as achieve the agility to navigate new challenges such as Web3. Web3 has since failed to live up to the hype. There's a reason that stuff like this is going away. Now, people cannot get as much out of what it was that they were planning for. As I mentioned when they talked about retail sales being down, one of the big markers of that is, again, and I always talk about the big screen TV. When we talk about finance and what it means and what the markets are doing, there's a big difference between people who are going out and spending on food, which is, that spending's up, and in the retail market even that's up, and what people are going out and spending on frivolous things. The big screen TV has always been an example because that seems to be what people buy first when they start to have some sort of success somewhere. They go out and buy the biggest TV that they can afford and go put it up in their living room, which, by the way, for me is 32 inches. I'm a modest guy, though. Even if I could afford more, I don't really watch enough TV that I need to have a gigantic 80-inch screen sitting in the middle of my living room. And I definitely don't watch enough movies that I really need a home theater. You guys know the meme, 5 movies, the only 5 movies I've ever seen in my life. But even the big screen TV is something that I think more people would be buying in a more tangible sense. Because it's something tangible, it's something that they can touch. Now, noting on that, Cameo, something where you can go spend a few bucks, and I've never used it, but I am tangentially familiar with what Cameo is. I think Stephen Ignoramus is actually on Cameo. But you pay X amount of fee to go have a celebrity make a greeting and send it out to somebody else. And there are a lot of big names that are on Cameo, and there are a lot of small-time names that are on there too. But yeah, you go pay X amount of dollars to have Ben Shapiro say that your show is the greatest. And I know that Stephen Ignoramus did that, by the way. There are a couple things that are going with that as well, and I think a big one, until copyright comes down, is that AI is probably going to make this a dead market at some point. But regardless, People are more looking at, if they are going to buy something that's not on the bare necessities, it's going to be like a Keurig or a toaster oven or a TV or something that they can have in the house that they can use over and over again, rather than a one-time quote from some celebrity out there saying happy birthday to their grandma. And that is where our market is at right now. It's still tight. When Cameo came out, people were flushed with cash. And this was even before the pink epoxy. And people were just flushed with cash and willing to go back out and put it into anything that they could because they had it. And they didn't really have a whole lot else that they could go spend it on. But we will see what happens with this. One bonus finance article here, just to tell you where the homes are. Homes selling near record highs again as supply shortage worsens, from Megan Henney. U.S. home prices surged again in June to a near record high, reflecting a worsening inventory shortage that has pushed many would-be home buyers out of the market. Median home prices jumped 1.9% in June from the previous month, hitting a $426,056 US dollars. According to a new report from real estate brokerage firm Redfin, home prices are now down just 0.6% from where they were a year ago, down 1.5% from the record high hit in May of 2022. Today's housing market is extraordinary. It feels hot, even if though there are very few homes changing hands. Redfin chief economist Daryl Fairweather said, and that, by the way, Daryl Fairweather is absolutely correct on this, because a part of the supply shortage is that people aren't leaving their homes to go pursue a new one. Which means that they're either not leaving their jobs, they're not leaving their area, they're not doing the things that people do because they're scared. So the few that hit the markets are gone like that, and you've got 55 buyers waiting for each house as it hits the market. And yes, of course, that's going to drive your prices up. So that is what we are doing. That's what we're seeing on our finance report for the day. We'll take one quick look at the live chat here before getting in and seeing what's happening with the Donald. Mogwai says Taco Tuesday, or as Biden calls it, I'm just resting my eyes, man. Tuesday or Monday. Silentcaster says, well, another contemporary stream. I'm going to stay the whole 2 hours this time. Wait, Ninja's streaming Counter-Strike. Well, Counter-Strike is entertaining. I wish you'd stay here for the entire stream, but you know, nobody's holding the gun to your head either, so. Besides, Mogwai gifted you the sub, so you're burning up Mogwai's money at this point. Mogwai says, if we get 10 indictment punches, do we get one free? Maybe. Mogwai says, I really hate that Ninja was on The Masked Singer, and I really hate that I know that, and I don't even know who Ninja is, so. Caster says, yes, they're like votes for Joe Biden. Mogwai says, vote once and vote often. Mogwai says, using the Marjorie Taylor Greene method with her impeachments, just indict everyone. Silentcaster says, gosh darn it, I'm gay in Florida and I voted for Trump in 2020. The whole government is after me, aren't they? Maybe. No plans in the chat, but go ahead and DM me on Discord, and we'll go from there. I wouldn't mind doing that. Moog also told me to get it in there recently. Nice. Okay, Mogwai, how'd you get the laughing dog without the border? Or is that something that you carried over from somebody else's? Because I have an emote for the laughing dog, but mine has the border. I don't know. We gotta talk Trump. I'm so thrilled that I'm going to spend the next hour and 40 minutes talking about the Donald before we do rules of acquisition, of course. And we're going to start with a tweet from DC Drano making the announcement because it's got Donald Trump's statement on it. This, by the way, is something that I did not see from anywhere else in the mainstream news media for this. But DC Drano tweets out breaking. President Trump announces he has received a letter from the DOJ signaling he will be arrested and indicted for January the 6th. Yes, the same January the 6th where National Guard troops were rejected by Democrats, where undercover FBI sources and DC PD officers were in the crowds, where Pelosi secretly worked to lower security measures and where police launched flashbangs and tear gas into the peaceful crowds. The DOJ is now going to indict the president, who fought against the fraudulent elections, honk honk, while they protect the crackhead Ukrainian bribe family in the White House. The deep state is the greatest threat to the American people, and we are sadly reminded today why that is true. They must be abolished down to the root. Well, let's see what the Donald had to say. Statement by Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States. Wow. On Sunday night, while I was with my family, having just arrived from the Turning Point event in Florida, great Florida, wonderful Florida, bad governor, the sanctimonious governor, great state of Florida, where I won the straw poll against all the other Republican candidates with 85.7%. I laugh at the propaganda from the left, but the Donald can spin it right for himself just as well. Except it's funny and entertaining when he does it. And with all the polls showing me leading in the Republican primary by very, very substantial numbers, almost everyone predicting that I'll be the Republican nominee for president, and as I am, leading Democrat Joe Biden in the polls by a lot, horrifying news for our country was given to me by my attorneys. Deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with Biden's DOJ, sent a letter, again it was Sunday night, stating that I am a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation and giving me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means arrest and indictment. So now Joe Biden's Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who I turned down for the United States Supreme Court, in retrospect, based on his corrupt and unethical actions, a very wise decision, together with Joe Biden's Department of Injustice, have effectively issued a third indictment and arrest of Joe Biden's number one political opponent, who's largely dominating him in the race for the presidency. Nothing like this has ever happened in our great country, and I love America, the greatest country in the world. Used to be led by me, the greatest president. Not even close. They illegally spied on my campaign, attacked me with a totally fake dossier that was funded by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC, impeached me twice. I won. And they failed on the Mueller witch hunt. No collusion. They failed on Russia hoax, the 51 intelligence agents fraud, the FBI Twitter files, the DOJ Facebook censorship, and every other scam imaginable. But on top of that, they have now effectively indicted me 3 times. The worst 3 times, the worst 3 indictments in history. The DOJ staff and run by the DA's office in Manhattan, with a probable 4th coming in Atlanta, where the DOJ are in strict and possible illegal coordination with the DA, whose record on murder and other violent crime is abysmal. And then we flip on the caps. This witch hunt is all about election interference and a complete and total political weaponization of law enforcement. It's a very sad and dark period for our nation. Spartan is over here with the sticker from DLive, because we're doing rules of acquisition later. It says arrest Trump, let's see the boomers get mad. It would be fun and totally worth it, even if he's completely innocent. Spartan going into burn it down mode. Mogwai says if Donald broke his arm patting himself on the back, he would spin it that Biden caused his arm to break to his Hunter Biden's crimes, and the people would believe it. It's amazing. So, that is the statement from the president, with the New York Post saying Trump says he expects arrest and indictment over January 6th Capitol riot. I probably could have skipped that one. But we do have the article from the New York Post. Trump says he's been told he is the target of DOJ's Capitol Selfie Fest probe, from Stephen Nelson. Former President Trump revealed Tuesday that his attorneys had informed him that he is a target of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the events surrounding the January 6th Selfie Fest. and that he is prepared for an arrest and indictment in the case. So, one thing to point out with this, and our friends to the left have been very smug and very, very eager to come back out and tell you that he is being arrested. They've got him this time. Technically, we don't know. Using statistics, using what's happened here before, and everything else that we've seen in history, it's very likely that he's going to, but technically there has not been an indictment dropped or announced, just saying that he has 4 days to report to the grand jury. We don't know if this is testimony, we don't know if he's going to be pleading the fifth or anything else for that. I would give better than 75% odds that this is going to be an indictment, an arrest. But the reality is we actually don't know. Trump, 77, is the frontrunner for the 2024 Republican nomination and decried on social media, Truth Social of course, what he called a witch hunt and election interference in his bid for a rematch against President Biden. And we read that one already. I read the entire statement. It's unclear what precisely Trump would be charged with in relation to the events of January the 6th. Though possibilities include obstructing an official proceeding, conspiracy to commit election fraud by authorizing slates of fake electors to pledge their votes to him, or knowingly soliciting money under false pretenses by claiming the need to fund or legal challenges. But he brought legal challenges. That one can get thrown out right there. Whether or not the judges threw them out is a different story, but he brought legal challenges, or his legal team did. Sometimes under the premises of the stupidest way possible, but they did bring legal challenges that needed to be funded. Trump told thousands of supporters gathered near the White House on the day of the riot that he wanted them to march on Congress and protest to help reverse his loss. If I remember that speech correctly, the protest was about making their voices heard and telling the country that they wouldn't be silenced, at least according to the speech. Now, what happened in the selfie fest after the fact is anybody's guess. So I would almost say that you could probably throw that one out too. As legislators met to formally count the results of the Electoral College. Trump also urged Vice President Mike Pence to attempt to unilaterally reject swing state electors, which Pence refused to do. A wild mob of Trump supporters and FBI agents fought with police, forced their way into the Capitol. Forced their way in. Hey, come on in, guys. And ransacked the building. 3 Trump fans died of medical emergencies, and another, Ashley Babbitt, was fatally shot by a cop as she climbed through a busted-out internal window. A Capitol Police officer, Brian Sicknick, himself a Trump voter, died the following day of a stroke, and at least 4 police officers and 3 riders involved in the clashes died by suicide. Trump often emphasizes he told the crowd to march peacefully and patriotically, but his critics note that he also told them to fight like hell and remain silent during the initial hours of the riot. That's also been time-stamped and debunked. I'm gonna debunk! The DOJ said it's arrested 1,069 alleged participants in the selfie fest, and many of them have been sentenced to prison terms for crimes including assaulting police. Yeah, nothing like a weaponized DOJ. Trump has been arrested twice so far, first in New York City in April under a novel business records falsification theory brought by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg over the 2016 hush money payments, and then in Miami in June, where Smith charged Trump with crimes relating to mishandling of classified records. Trump may face a 4th persecution, more like it, in state charges in Georgia, where authorities are investigating his attempt to reverse Biden's roughly 12,000 vote victory in the Peach State. If you have listened to the entire phone call for that, you will also see that one getting thrown out. But Fani Willis is not going to throw that out until it gets to trial. The DOJ's press office referred the post to Smith's spokesman Peter Carr, who declined to comment on Trump's statement. Which, in Smith's case and in Smith's media team's case, would actually be the smartest thing to do. Again, right now there is no guarantee that this is going to be an arrest and indictment in 4 days. Which would, by the way, if he got the letter on Sunday, would mean that he would be arriving in D.C. in front of the grand jury on Thursday, 2 days from now. I would still lay 75% better than 75% odds that there is an arrest there, but there are other possibilities for that. One of the big questions that came up with this being here, because this was the subject of Impeachment 2.0, and I will use a tweet from Stephanie A.C., mutual with me, that says, didn't the Senate already go through with the impeachment proceedings over January the 6th and found Trump not liable? They had a whole committee with that blonde lady Liz. Is this double jeopardy in a fair society? Technically, it's not. There are legal arguments where you could try to come out and say that it's double jeopardy. Technically, it is not double jeopardy. Because the impeachment system, when it was incepted by our founding fathers and rationalized and written out in the Constitution, was built in a way to remove elected officials from their service in government where they had executive privileges and other legislative privileges, to remove them from the government and have them face down a civilian court. So technically, no, that's not the case. Although that would be a strong defense coming from the Trump team if he were to be arrested and indicted, for him to come back out and say, look, okay, although he probably won't testify in his own defense, but to have his attorneys come out, and I'll still use his voice and say, look, okay, I've already been going through trial for this, the worst trial by evil Nancy Pelosi and her chattering teeth. I went through, I had a trial, and I already beat the Senate, which was far, far against me. Worst Senate in history. So I don't know what your people are going to come out with this with, but I've already been tried on this one once. Your move, Jack Smith. And don't get me wrong, as I said in the tweet, it's still railroading. But it misses the double jeopardy definition on a technicality. Other people are saying that yes, it is double jeopardy, but why does the DOJ care about in concert with the law? That's not necessarily true. Again, technically it's not. Even though, yes, he's being tried for the same crime twice, he's actually being tried through the judiciary rather than the legislature. That's what makes this different. The other side of that is for impeachment, the only penalty that's out there is removal. In a civilian court, which is what Jack Smith is trying to drag him in front of, he could face criminal charges and possible prison time. Although for him it would be house arrest because there's no way to put a former president into the big house where he's got to be surrounded by Secret Service. Boomboxes over on Rumble says, Epps, we need to go into the Capitol. Hey, leave him alone. Trump, please go home with peace in your hearts. Guilty, get him. Boomboxes says 81 million votes totally didn't honk the shit out of the election. Yeah, I that's been something that's been brought up earlier today too. Well, it says in the USA where all you need is a hint of a pulse to be president. By the way, reminder, one of the things that I love to hear while you guys are watching, if you're in the live chat, is tell me what you guys are having for dinner tonight. Give me ideas. Give me recipes I can steal from you. Or in Boombox's case, breakfast. A little bit of backlash from this, because apparently there was supposed to be big news from the DeSantis camp today. I found this, I have not pre-read this, so I don't know what's coming from this, but apparently there was supposed to be big DeSantis news today. From The Hill, the memo Trump indictment steals headlines from GOP rivals from Neil Stenage. The specter of the January 6th Selfie Fest rose again on Tuesday in a series of dramatic developments, even as questions remain about how those events will impact the 2024 presidential race. The biggest news of all was confirmation from former President Trump that he expects to be indicted in the investigation into the Capitol Selfie Fest, and that the event surrounding it, the probe, is spearheaded by special counsel Jack Smith. The likely indictment overshadowed the latest attempt by Florida man, I never call him Florida governor, Florida man Ron DeSantis to reset his faltering campaign. Look, before we go into this, Ron, listen to me. I want there to be a viable challenger against the Donald. Because I want him to be forced to debate. I want him to be able to show that his ideas are better than his viable contender. But after SB 269 and misstep after misstep after misstep on the campaign trail, Ron, you are not the viable contender that it's supposed to be. And I would if I was your campaign advisor, I would say drop out of the race while you still have a breath of a chance of running in Florida and winning. Because you alienate Florida voters every single time you misstep on the presidential campaign trail. Which is lame, because I hear a lot of people down there really like you. DeSantis' high-profile interview with CNN's Jake Tapper came to be largely dominated by Trump-related developments. DeSantis said he hoped his rival, who's leading the Florida governor by about 30 points in national polls, I hope he doesn't get charged, adding, I don't think it'd be good for our country. At almost the exact same time as DeSantis' interview was airing, I didn't even realize that was airing, by the way. We'll probably talk about that tomorrow. I'm going to see if I can either watch or listen to the interview tonight or tomorrow morning. And we'll talk about that because of the indictment going on, I didn't even know it was happening. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel announced that 16 residents of her state have been charged with felonies because of their involvement in the alleged false elector scheme following the 2020 presidential election. We'll be talking about that later on. All those developments came on Tuesday alone. The previous day, the Georgia Supreme Court quashed an effort by Trump's lawyers to derail possible indictment in that state. That's also on the stack for the day, centering on efforts by the former president and his allies to overturn the election result. In Georgia, Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis has indicated she expects to decide whether and whom to charge by August 18th. Okay, we know the whom. Orange Man bad. It is a starting barrage of news, and one that would almost certainly be politically fatal to any contender for public office not named Donald Trump. The complication is that the previous legal setbacks for the former president have coincided with upticks in approval for him among GOP voters, an apparent rallying around effect from a swath of the population inclined to believe Trump's claims that he's being targeted for political reasons. I want to push back on that. The broader electorate is a different story, of course. Let me read this paragraph, and then I want to push back on what this is and what this means. The return of January 6th to the headlines could spell bad news for Trump in a general election if he were to become the GOP nominee. That is correct, by the way. Because he has just finally gotten to the point where he's starting to ignore okay, I totally won. January 6th, I totally won. I totally won in 2020. So I'm really the legal president, and if you don't think so, then you're a terrible person, and you're a traitor, and everything else. He's finally got past that and started to look forward, and now January the 6th and the results of the 2020 election are going to be back in the headlines forever. So, yes, the Hill is correct on that one. In an Economist YouGov poll released last week, Trump was viewed unfavorably by 56% of Americans and favorably by just 42%. In the weighted polling average maintained by data site 538, Trump's unfavorable number has recently edged up to its highest point ever at almost 58%. Okay, that's a one outlier. 538 is an aggregator, but I want to look at Real Clear Politics for just a second. Because I want to see where our Trump approval is. So we've got latest polls here. Let's have a look. 2024 Republican presidential primary, Trump 37, DeSantis 23. That's a single one. We have a Ohio Trump versus Biden, 44-38. DeSantis Biden, 39-37. General election, Biden 43, Trump 41. We'll look at that one too. I do want to see if there is a Trump approval. There does not appear to be. No. Okay, let's look at some of these primary and general ones then. New Hampshire primary. Let's look at what the aggregates are. 41-19, Trump plus 22. And again, we're still Trump plus 22 on that one. Let's see, Trump v. Biden. That's Ohio. Is there a national general one out here? Yeah, because they don't have enough data to do a full one. General election right here from the Morning Consult. Trump v. Biden, general election. RCP average is actually showing Biden plus 0.4. Which I'm a little surprised by this one. And there is a lot of polling that they're running from here. Let's see. But no Trump approval on this one. So we'll have to go with what the Hill is saying for this one. Still, there are not many persuadable voters on either side of the pro and anti-Trump equation, and there will likely be no seismic shift now. Last year's House Select Committee hearings into January the 6th, for example, commanded media headlines for weeks, but Trump's approval ratings soon settled back into their usual range. Well, I want to go back and talk about this paragraph here for just a second. The complications that previous legal setbacks for the former president have coincided with upticks in approval for him among GOP voters. And I do think that there is some sympathy coming to him from the independent side as well. An apparent rallying around effect from a swath of the population inclined to believe Trump's claims that he's being targeted for political reasons. So, I mean, those of you who know me know that I do argue on Twitter a lot, because I enjoy it and I try to hold some of these anti-Trump people's feet to the fire when they go into it. I enjoy it. I know that's not popular among some members of the audience. I apologize, but I do enjoy it. But one of the things is that many of them think that I am a rock-ribbed, dyed-in-the-wool, would never vote for anybody else Trump supporter. I am not. I am not planning on voting for Trump in 2024. And I did vote for him extremely reluctantly in 2020 because I know that we're going to have another blowout spending bomb. He's going to cut the taxes, and that's going to be cool, but we're going to have another massive blowout spending bomb, just like we did last time. He hasn't changed. He hasn't learned his lesson. That was the reason I was so reluctant to do it in 2020, is because of the blowout spending bomb. But unless you are taking in everything that the mainstream media is telling you and believing it without any sort of pushback, without any sort of second thought or any sort of independent research. Yet there's still got to be a part of you, deep down inside, that knows that throwing the leading political candidate in the gulag typically does not end well in history. And I'm willing to put the olive branch out there and say that there are people, even on the left side of the aisle, that are starting to see this. It makes Biden look weak. It makes the Democrat Party look weak that they're attempting to jail their main political opponent. And right from the beginning, when they first did the indictment from Alvin Bragg, which Biden couldn't do a pardon from there, but Kathy Hochul could. And I even suggested that with Kathy Hochul. If Kathy Hochul wanted to make Biden's numbers pop for approval, she would come right down and say, I hereby formally pardon Donald Trump for the charges against him coming from DA Alvin Bragg. We don't have to resort to these kinds of games to beat him. And Biden the same way. Hey man, I don't need to use the DOJ to beat President Trump, man. Look at me. I'll just take him behind the woodshed. So we're not gonna do the DOJ thing. I'm gonna beat him fair and square, man. And I'm issuing a pardon so he doesn't have to be mired down in the legal bullcrap. And then I'm gonna get out of the polls, man, and I'm gonna beat him fair and square like I did at Corn Pop last week. Come on, man. Again, this machine is not acting like a machine that's confident. They're acting like they're afraid. Moving on to the classified documents scandal, which I've got some lengthy tweets to read on this one as well. From Politico, Judge Mull's timing of Trump classified documents trial. From Andrew Atterbury and Josh Gerstein. A federal judge heard lengthy arguments Tuesday over when to start a criminal trial for former President Trump on charges that he hoarded classified information at his Florida home and then obstructed a grand jury investigation, but the hearing concluded without a trial date being set. Defense lawyers and prosecutors for special counsel Jack Smith squared off for nearly 2 hours in front of U.S. District Court Judge Eileen Cannon at the first hearing she held in the case. Smith's team obtained an indictment of the former president last month on 31 counts of willfully retaining national defense information and 6 counts of obstruction of justice. Lawyers for Trump pleaded with Cannon, a Trump appointee, to put the trial off until after next year's presidential election. I actually don't think that's a good idea from their position. And if I was a Trump lawyer, I would actually be pushing to get this done as quickly as possible. Hey Eileen, can we maybe start this like next week? Can we do that? Hey, how about August 1st? How's that sound? I'd be pushing to get this through as fast as I could. Todd Blanche ridiculed the claims by prosecutors that the case involving hundreds of sensitive national security documents and thousands of hours of video does not qualify as complex under federal court rules. This is not a normal case, Blanche said, calling prosecutors' proposed schedule pretty disingenuous. He said pushing the trial off until next year was necessary to give defense lawyers time to review the huge volumes of evidence that the government has turned over. We're not asking for special treatment, that's the reality, Blanche insisted. Assistant Special Counsel David Harbach defended his office's proposal for a trial starting on December 11th, saying that Trump should be treated like any other important person with a busy schedule facing serious criminal charges. He also declared that politics has no impact on the handling of the case against Trump. That is a load of bullshit. There has been none, Harbach said. So, no trial date yet at this point. Mogwai over on Twitch says, hey man, I'm issuing a pardon for Donald Trump. Mr. President, this is Wendy's. I could see that too. Except I don't think he'd be doing his own ordering at Wendy's, obviously, but... Boombox has said, I've said this before and I'll say it again. In all my 53 years, I've never seen anyone be hounded like they have done with Trump. And all people in government have done shit, but conveniently ignored. That's right, you are older than me. I keep forgetting because your screen name over on YouTube was 80s Kid. So I thought that you were like 80s was your birth year, so you'd be right around somewhere in the same age range as me. Not that you were growing up and listening to Darkwave and stuff in the 80s when it was still new. And you've told me that, and I keep forgetting it because I keep still associating 80s Kid in my head. Alright, let's look at some of the analysis that's going on for this. Julie Kelly doing the Lord's work on this one, who I don't follow. Liz Harrington tweets out, nothing like this has ever happened in our country before, or even a close. This witch hunt is all about election interference and a complete and total political weaponization of the law enforcement. It's a very sad look and dark period for our nation, which Julie Kelly tweets back and says, I've warned of this for over a year. I take no pride in being right. The only question now is what charges Smith will bring. Strong possibility he'll seek indictment on seditious conspiracy, which would be an interesting charge to bring in a case like this because that would be one of the narrow convictions that would cue and trigger the 14th Amendment's bar of having Trump on the ballot. And who's charged with him? Any conspiracy charges require at least one co-conspirator. I think that they're going to get Nauta just so they have someone so they could say conspiracy. But here's the lengthy one, which is a bit interesting to me, based again on how they're trying to pull both the January 6th case and the documents case. I wrote this in April about how the outcomes of the Pride Boys seditious conspiracy trial would impact Smith's pending case against Trump for January the 6th. Of the hundreds of video clips used as evidence in the marathon trial of the 5 members of the Pride Boys, prosecutors began closing arguments with not a clip of the defendants engaged in criminal activity, but with a clip of Donald Trump. The government showed the jury a portion of the September 2020 presidential debate, goaded by Biden, and then Fox News host Chris Wallace to condemn white supremacist and militia groups in an effort to downplay Black Lives Matter and Antifa violence. Trump asked them to give me a name, and Biden quickly answered, Hey man, the Proud Boys! Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, Trump said in response. The offhand remark, Trump later said he didn't even know who the Proud Boys were, made the group jubilant. Assistant U.S. Attorney Connor Mulrow told the jury on Monday morning. These defendants saw themselves as Trump's army fighting to keep their preferred leader in power no matter what, Mulrow said, referring to Ethan Nordine, Joe Biggs, Enrique Tarrio, Dominic Pizzola, and Zachary Real. Prosecutors have used the clip at other points during the nearly 4-month trial. A not-so-subtle reminder to jurors that the city that voted 93% for Biden, that the men on trial supported Trump. But the Justice Department may have a more sinister reason to tie the Pride Boys to the former president. Any convictions in this trial would give Special Counsel Smith, an independent prosecutor, in name only, justification to pursue similar charges against Trump as a co-conspirator of sorts. In fact, the Pride Boys faced 3 conspiracy counts: seditious conspiracy, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, and a conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties. A conspiracy, according to the government, only requires an agreement of 2 or more individuals. Prosecutors insist the conspiracy began on December 19th, 2020, a date that should alarm Team Trump at 1:42 a.m. on December 19th. Trump tweeted this: Statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. Big protests in D.C. on January the 6th. And by the way, I remember that too, because it was only a couple days later that my coworker came to me and said, "Oh, well, they better at least hear us out, otherwise we're going to take the fight right to them in D.C." And I told him that it'd be like shooting fish in a barrel, and he would die if he went there. According to the DOJ, that prompted Tarrio and Biggs to formulate plans to radicalize the group. The next day, Tarrio created an encrypted chat to discuss, among other things, plans to travel to D.C. for Trump's speech on January the 6th, which, if I remember correctly, Tarrio wasn't there. Fact check me if I'm wrong. The government obtained roughly 500,000 messages between dozens of accounts, including an unknown number posted by FBI informants. Plans. As I explained in my Wednesday column, discussions resulted not in an armed, violent attempt to overthrow the government, but a haphazard plan with no cohesive execution. Some stopped at food trucks on the walk from a rallying point at the Washington Monument to Capitol grounds, like all good insurrectionists on a coordinated and deliberate mission to do. Tarrio, there's my fact check right there. Tarrio, the group's leader, wasn't even in D.C. that day. Man, this is long-winded. I swear this took me a lot shorter to read to myself. But reality and evidence don't count for much before juries in the nation's capital as the DOJ, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia Matthew Graves, a Biden appointee who attended the government's closing arguments on Monday morning, more specifically racks up a near-perfect conviction rate in January 6 trials. To be fair, Graves' office isn't alone in blaming Trump for instigating the Proud Boys' actions here and before and on January the 6th. At least two defense attorneys also pointed the finger at Trump. A nation of strangers gathered as the commander-in-chief sold a lie. Norman Pattis, representing Biggs, set up Trump's election claims. It was a perfect storm. Come to January 6th, going to be wild, the commander-in-chief said. So, I am going to stop right here on this, but it is important to see when they are going to do something with this, some of the evidence that has been circulating around and the places that Trump has been tied to this, in spite of the fact that he told everyone to go home with peace in their hearts. And on the documents case, big court hearing today in Special Prosecutor Jack Smith's classified documents case against Trump. Eileen Cannon will consider Smith's request to continue the trial from August to December, and Smith's strict protective order for defense handling of alleged classified material. So let's set the record straight as what's to happen in this case so far. Just like Russia collusion and every other anti-Trump farce concocted by Democrats, admin, state apparatchiks, and the media, the ruling narrative is that Trump intentionally stole hundreds of top-secret files from the government, hid them in boxes, took them to the Mar-a-Lago in Bedminster, with the intention of sharing sensitive information with our enemies in ultimate betrayal of America. By the way, both of these are linked in the Discord, because I'm not going to go through them all, but she also does come with receipts on this. DOJ apologists, Republicans as usual, also promote the lie. Chris Christie told CNN's Jake Tapper over the weekend Trump illegally retained classified national secrets after being asked politely, quietly, and professionally for 18 months to voluntarily turn them back in. Over and over after he left the White House, Christie further claimed that Trump flashed around documents regarding Iranian war plan to people who didn't have clearance to see them and lied to his lawyers. Some facts, and we'll gloss over a bit of this here. In May of 2021, National Archives contacted Trump's team to insist presidential records were missing. So what's missing? Obama's letter to Trump and Trump's correspondence with Kim Jong-un needed to be turned over. Trump could have told NARA to pound sand according to the Presidential Records Act, according to this, but voluntarily gave 15 boxes of materials to NARA. Within 48 hours, Bosenko worked with NARA's Inspector General to send a criminal referral to Biden's DOJ, something he'd never done in the past. Biden, Garland, and Monaco, DOJ wasted no time opening a criminal investigation. After what appears to be an extensive review, which involved Walton Nauta, his aide-in-charge co-conspirator, as well as attorney Evan Corcoran, Trump produced another 38 responsive to hand over to the DOJ. Keep in mind, Trump allowed FBI agents and DOJ counterintelligence chief Jay Bratt into his home on June 3rd to accommodate the investigation. But the DOJ had to keep the ruse going, so an agent out of the corrupt Washington FBI field office sought a search warrant not just for classified material, but also for national defense information. After a roughly 9-hour raid, the FBI absconded with 13,000 pieces of evidence, including Melania's underwear, I will add, outside of what Julia Kelly said. Of that trove, the DOJ later admitted agents located 102 documents with classified markings. That's it. So, a lot more with that. But again, with the receipts showing that Trump was cooperating with NARA in a position where he didn't have to be, but he was doing so voluntarily. Again, I urge you to read the entire lengthy tweet for yourself. It is linked in the Discord in articles worth investigating. Matt Gaetz with a response to this here. From The Independent, Matt Gaetz launches bill to defund Jack Smith probe as Trump asks Capitol allies for January 6th indictment help. From Abe Asher, Matt Gaetz of Florida said his podcast that he will... Matt Gaetz has a podcast? Why? Matt Gaetz said in his podcast that he'll be, in the coming days, introduce a bill to defund Jack Smith's investigation into former President Trump, as Mr. Trump reportedly asks Capitol Hill allies for help as he faces another potential indictment. Now, with this, we don't have to spend a lot of time on, because this is DOA. It'll get through a few, maybe of the House, maybe, but I doubt it. There are enough people who are sympathetic to the central power and the uniparty that this doesn't pass. This doesn't even get out of committee. In the coming hours, the coming days, I'll be introducing legislation under my name in the House as a freestanding bill to defend the Jack Smith investigation, Mr. Gaetz said on Tuesday. And one reason why is the election interference feature. Another reason why, the lack of transparency. Let's listen.
In the coming hours, the coming days, I will be introducing legislation under House of Representatives as a freestanding bill to defund the Jack Smith investigation. And one reason why is the election interference feature. Another reason why, the lack of transparency. I have sent correspondence to the Attorney General. I just want to know who's on the Jack Smith team.
So, I mean, I'd like to know who's on there too, but again, this is what we're spending our money on right now. Again, if anybody had any sort of political savvy whatsoever, Biden, Hochul, anybody. No, we don't need to win this way. We can win fair and square, but they don't have political savvy. Moving on to Michigan, and then Arizona, and then finally Georgia. From the Daily Wire, 16 pro-Trump false electors charged with felonies in Michigan. From Daily Wire News, AG Dana Nessel announced on Tuesday that 16 residents in the state have been charged with felonies over their alleged role in a scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. The defendants allegedly met on December 14, 2020 and signed their names to multiple official documents, certifying that they were the duly elected and qualified electors for President and Vice President of the U.S. and for the state of Michigan. Now, that timing is interesting. Let's go back to Julia Kelly for just a moment, because because this one is another one I didn't pre-read, that date caught my mind right away. Let me scroll down into here. So this is 5 days before the Trump tweets statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. I thought this was the same day, but no, this was 5 days before. The false documents were then transmitted to the U.S. Senate and National Archives in a coordinated effort to award the state's electoral votes to the candidate of their choosing. In place of the candidates actually elected by the people of Michigan, the statement added. Each of the defendants was charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit forgery, a 14-year felony, 2 counts of forgery, a 14-year felony, 1 count of conspiracy to commit uttering and publishing, a 14-year felony, 1 count of uttering and publishing, a 14-year felony, 1 count of conspiracy to commit election law forgery, a 5-year felony, and 2 counts of election law forgery, a 5-year felony. Of course, they won't be to be served concurrently, of course. What do we got? 14, 28, 42, 56, 61, and 66. So, and when we look at these age of these people, Dana Nessel's looking to put these people away for life. The defendants are Kathy Burton, 70 of Snorver. Well, I don't have to put their hometowns in. Kathy Burton, 70. William Choate, 72. Amy Facinello, 55. Clifford Frost, 75. Stanley Rutt, 71. John Haggard, 82. Marianne Henry, 65. Timothy King, 56. Michelle Lundgren, 73. Michonne Maddock, 55. Jim Renner, 76. Mara Rodriguez, 64. Rose Rook, 81. Marion Sheridan, 69. Ken Thompson, 68. And Kent Vanderwood, 69. It would be almost impossible to imagine any of these people getting through 2 of the 14-year sentences, which I'm sure are going to be served one at a time. But to give each of them 66 years, when doesn't one of them have 66 years left in them? Nessel said that she's persecuted numerous cases of election law violations throughout my tenure, and would be malfeasance of the greatest magnitude if my department failed to act here in the face of overwhelming evidence of an organized effort to circumvent the lawfully cast ballots of millions of Michigan voters in a presidential election. The evidence will demonstrate there was no legal authority for the false electors to purport to act as the duly elected presidential electors and execute the false electoral documents. Nessel continued, every serious challenge to the election has been denied, dismissed, or otherwise rejected by the time the false electors convened. Honk honk. There was no legitimate legal avenue or plausible use of such a document or an alternative slate of electors. There was only the desperate effort of these defendants, who would have charged with deliberately attempting to interfere with the overturn our free and fair election process. That is such a propagandized statement. You do understand because you watch the show every day. And along with it, the will of the millions of Michigan voters. That the effort failed and democracy prevailed does not erase the crimes of those who enacted the false electors' plot. So, yeah, this definitely doesn't look like cracking down. Now, under normal circumstances, by the way, I would not be entirely opposed to at least having an investigation into here. But these charges came down the same day that it became public that the Donald was supposedly going to be facing indictment and arrest. And 2 days after the letter was received, which means, give or take, this was 4 or 5 days after the letter was sent out. In Arizona, from NPC News, Arizona's AG is probing alternate electors who backed Trump in the 2020 election. What do you want to bet that she's got 66 years waiting up for these people as well? From Vaughn Hilliard and DeRay Gregorian. Arizona AG Chris May's office is investigating the transmission of an alternate slate of electors by Trump allies to be included in Congress's counting of electoral votes on January the 6th. A source familiar with the probe said on Thursday. A second source familiar with the matter said prosecutors from May's office have had direct conversations with legal counsel for multiple people who acted as alternate electors, including former Arizona GOP Chair Kelly Ward. A lawyer for Ward has been asked for comment. May is a Democrat who narrowly defeated a 2020 election denier in November, had previously vowed to investigate fake electors scheme, which was designed to challenge President Biden's election win in Arizona. We have to make sure it's clear to everyone that it's unacceptable to try to steal an election, to undermine and overthrow an election, and that's what's happened, Mays told MSDNC this year. We have to make sure what happened in 2020 never happens again. You know what that sounds like when I read that right there? That sounds like we have to make an example of anybody who attempted to question this election that we told them was free and fair and we told them the results of, so that nobody's ever tempted to come back out and do this again. And that's what this sounds like from here. Boomboxer says homeless folks commit violent felonies all the time and get nothing. These old folks get 66 years for words. And again, with that, what Boomboxer said ties in perfectly with what I just said about what May said on MSDNC. Yeah, we've got to make an example out of these folks. We've got to make sure that it's so unpalatable to question the narrative that nobody ever does it again. May's predecessor, Mark Brnovich, did not investigate the elector scheme, but he had agents in the AG's office spend more than 10,000 hours looking into GOP claims of voting irregularities and allegations of illegal voting, May's office said in a news release this year. So, that is also getting ramped up. In Georgia, we've got a story in 3 parts. So starting with Fox 5 out of Atlanta, Trump asked Georgia Supreme Court to quash special jury report to disqualify Fulton County DA. This was a long shot from the beginning. Part of the reason it didn't make it to the stack on Friday or yesterday, even though I did intend to talk about this today, already before the Trump news dropped. From Fox 5 Atlanta Digital Team, lawyers for the former President Trump have filed a new petition with the Georgia Supreme Court attempting to quash the grand jury investigation into whether he and allies should be criminally charged for allegedly meddling in the 2020 election. The petition comes days after Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney swore in 2 grand juries on Tuesday, one of which is expected to hear evidence in the Georgia election case. In that petition, Trump's lawyers claimed that the original special purpose grand jury that spent 8 months hearing evidence went beyond its lawful purview, and that attempts to quash the report and disqualify Fani Willis have been ignored by McBurney. Stranded between the supervising judge's proactive passivity and the DA's looming indictment, petitioner has no meaningful option other than to seek this court's intervention, Trump's lawyers wrote. The former president is asking Georgia's top court to bar the special purpose grand jury's report from ever being used in future legal proceedings, forbid Willis from introducing any evidence her office received from the special purpose grand jury to a regular grand jury, and disqualify Willis from acting in any proceeding involving Trump. Willis has previously commented that a similar motion by Trump was procedurally flawed and advances arguments lacked merit. So, and again, very, very big long shot on this one. There's some merit to this. I believe that Willis was another one that went out and campaigned on the fact that she was going to get him. She was going to go and bring him to justice and all the other fun crap that comes off of this. But typically, I mean, a request to dismiss on grounds or any other number of reasons is not a new thing either. I mean, almost any criminal trial, during the investigation, after the indictment, and even coming up into pre-trial, the defense will try to find either a procedural ground or an evidentiary ground to try to have this dismissed. We're going to see this with Eileen Cannon's judgment for the documents case. I promise you we're going to see some of that. Because it's standard operating procedure. The defense attorney is looking for a way to not have a person appear in front of court. Because you are innocent until proven guilty. No matter what the Twitter mob tries to say. Boomboxer says, how is this allowed to happen? It's beyond belief. These people most likely don't have a criminal record. They probably never even stepped foot in a police station in their life. Well, again, as I said, going back to the Michigan and even the Arizona one, they're making an example out of these people. But it is denied from NPC News. Georgia Supreme Court denies Trump bid to derail Fulton County election probe. From Blaine Alexander, Charlie Guile, and DeRay Gregorian. Georgia Supreme Court on Monday denied Trump's bid to halt the Fulton County District Attorney's probe into whether the former president and his allies interfered in the state's 2020 presidential election. The rejected petition was one of two that Trump's lawyers filed in different Georgia courthouses last week, both seeking to effectively derail Fani Willis's investigation into whether there were coordinated attempts to unlawfully alter the outcome of the 2020 elections. The petition sought to disqualify Willis from investigating Trump and to quash a report from the special grand jury she used to help her investigation. There were also, by the way, grounds to disqualify that based on who was there. We'll remember the Wiccan chick. This is the same special grand jury, by the way, where the Wiccan chick went on her media tour and told the world how much of a responsibility she felt to go back and get Trump. But also how much awe she was in by being there. In a brief unanimous ruling, the 9-judge state Supreme Court said that Trump was seeking is not the sort of relief that this court affords. It's a fair assessment. At least absent extraordinary circumstances that the petitioner has not shown are present here. Which again is pretty standard operating procedure. I know a lot of Republicans and Trump supporters right now, and I do differentiate between the two, but are thinking that this is some extraordinary point where the Supreme Court is acting out of malice or in the favor of the DA. No, this is standard procedure for this. The defense goes out and tries to get something thrown out on procedural grounds, and they typically have a 5 to 10% success rate in doing so. This is business as usual that the paid shills are using to come out and try to say, hey, he's guilty and he's trying to avoid guilt. From CBS. And I think, no, we've got one more after this. I think this is close to our last Trump article. Which is pretty good time because I thought for sure we would be going into this deep into the end of the program. Deep and hard, as the ATF agent Beavis and Butthead Do America like to say. Don't stop until you hit the back of their teeth. A grand jury in Fulton County may soon consider charges against former President Trump and allies, who allegedly sought to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election results, which he lost. Here's what to know about the investigation and possible charges. I know Tristan Snell was out here saying, oh, they're going to get Giuliani and Sidney Powell and everybody else. Everybody who's ever tangentially been in the same room as Trump is going to get charged for this and thrown in prison. The investigation, led by DA Fani Willis, began shortly after a recorded January 2nd, 2021 phone call, in which only 20% of it was released to the public through the mainstream media, And the rest of us who knew how to dig were able to find the full 45-minute phone call and listen to it. Between Trump and Raffensperger was made public. On the call, Trump told Raffensperger, "Look, okay, I just want to find 11,780 votes." The number he would have needed to overtake Joe Biden. The investigation ultimately developed into a sprawling probe of efforts to sway the election for Trump. In the months after Mr. Biden's win in 2022, a special purpose grand jury was impaneled in the case. The grand jury has the power to issue subpoenas and produce a final report with indictment recommendations. Over the course of 6 months in 2022, it interviewed 75 witnesses. Portions of the report were released to the public in February and said a majority of grand jury believes the perjury may have been committed by one or more witnesses testifying before it, and recommended that the DA seek appropriate indictments for crimes where the evidence is compelling. Which kind of, again, hints to me that they're going to go after a process crime, not the actual, he tried to overthrow the election. In media interviews after the report was delivered to Willis's office, the special purpose grand jury's foreperson indicated multiple indictments were recommended. The special purpose grand jury's findings can be presented to a regular grand jury, which would vote on whether to indict. On July 11th, 2 groups of 23 Fulton County residents and 3 alternates were selected to be grand jurors. One group will meet on Mondays and Tuesdays, the other will meet on Thursdays and Fridays. It's unclear which group will consider potential charges against Trump or his allies. A majority, 12, would need to vote in favor of an indictment. Willis has indicated in letters to the county officials that potential indictments in the case could come between July 31st and August 18th. Willis' office sent letters in 2022 to multiple Trump allies warning they could face charges, including fake electors who plan to reverse the state's electoral college vote, and Trump's former attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Among those interviewed by the special purpose grand jury were many Trump allies, including Giuliani, Mogwai's favorite senator, Lindsey Graham, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. It also interviewed key Georgia officials who were among Trump's political critics, including Raffensperger and Brian Kemp. So, that's where we go with that. And why is this happening right now? Our last Trump article, I promise, from the Daily Wire. Leftoids, I refuse to call them liberals, by the way, leftoids fret over Trump's plan to exert presidential authority over fourth branch of government. From Leif LeMahieu. Former President Trump will move to rein in the power of unelected federal bureaucrats, if elected, in 2024, according to former and current advisors. Trump, who faced nearly constant opposition from inside the federal government during his time as president, will move to assert executive power over federal agencies if given a second term as president, acting under a legal principle known as the unitary executive theory. The plans, which were featured in Tuesday's New York Times article, a former newspaper, prompted cries of authoritarianism from the left, but have been praised by conservative policy leaders. Yes, it's always authoritarian when your president dismantles the police state. That's the most authoritarian thing that he can do. You fucking mooks. Our current executive branch, former Trump aide John McEntee, told The Times was conceived of by liberals for the purpose of promulgating liberal policies. There's no way to make the existing structure function in a conservative manner. It's not enough to get the personnel right. What's necessary is a complete system overhaul. Before Trump left office, an EO was drafted but never issued. That would have given a review of regulatory actions by federal agencies. Section F, by the way. Trump and his allies say that agencies like the FTC have acted as a sort of fourth branch of government. Ann Applebaum, a staff writer for The Atlantic, said the plans would destroy American democracy. So, whenever one of these leftoids say that our democracy is at risk, they're going to destroy our democracy. They're going to kill our democracy. They're going after our democracy. What they actually mean is their hegemony. Read this again, and we're going to read this by what Ann Applebaum actually means. Ann Applebaum, a staff writer for The Atlantic, said the plans would destroy Democrat hegemony. Imagine wanting to destroy the U.S. as a democratic hegemony and a society so much that it would scheme to give this kind of power to someone as cruel and vengeful and mentally limited as Trump, she wrote on Twitter. Trump, who leads the polling for the presidential nomination, has already laid out plans to enact a similar executive order in a policy video from April 2023. Execute Section F. I will bring the independent regulatory agencies, such as the FCC and FTC, back under presidential authority as the Constitution demands. These agencies do not get to become the fourth branch of government, issuing rules and edicts all by themselves. And that's what they've been doing. We will require they submit any regulations they're considering for White House review. Which, by the way, is the basis for West Virginia versus EPA, which is the decision that the Supreme Court came to, is that the EPA cannot unilaterally make rules. Now, the Supreme Court said that the rules have to come from Congress, which I agree with. I don't necessarily think the White House needs to be doing the review of it. I think that the rules should come from Congress. The Times characterized the unitary executive theory as a rejection of traditional American legal principles, like the separation of powers and checks and balances. That's not a separation of powers, though. I know they said like the separation of powers, but that's not a separation of powers. They are under the purview of the executive branch. By framing disputed by the Center for Renewing American President, Russ Budd, who supports the paradigm-shifting policies. I hesitate to take any issue with the New York Times article because of the sheer enjoyment of the ongoing liberal freakout, but this sentence is totally false. The legal theory rejects the idea the government is composed of three separate branches with overlapping powers to check and balance each other, Bott said on Twitter. No, it rejects the current governing consensus that a fourth branch, never mentioned in the Constitution, can be created out of whole cloth and made immune from the wishes of voters. Hear, hear. See, this is the kind of thing, if he actually has a plan to execute this, that might make me actually consider swallowing my pride and voting for the man again. I probably won't do it because I know what this price tag is that comes from it, but that's the kind of thing that makes me consider it again. Boomboxes says, the people that won Brandon the 2020 election need to go to jail. No one believes that he got 81 million votes. Most secure election in history, by the way. They committed the biggest crime. Boomboxer says, whether you like Trump or hate him, this should be enough to wake people up. This stinks #1 bullshit. And that is what we have from the Trump news. Let's talk about Texas and the border, which might take up the rest of our time slot, but we will see. From the LA Times, Texas sends a third bus of migrants to LA, latest in Governor Abbott's political protest. From Jack Herrera, a bus carrying 35 migrants from the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas is set to arrive in Los Angeles on Thursday, the third in a series launched by Abbott and sent to California. Volunteers with LA Welcomes Collective, a network of nonprofit faith and immigrant rights groups, were waiting to greet the bus at Union Station. They were alerted that the bus had left the border city of Brownsville early Wednesday. We're grateful to the city of Brownsville for sending information in advance about the bus so we can better prepare to welcome them, Lindsay Kokslowski, the executive director of the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, said in a statement. We will continue to work with our community partners and receive migrants with dignity and ensure their legal needs are met. Kokslowski's organization and others in the collective will offer migrants food, clothing, and legal consultations upon their arrival. The latest bus will roll into the station a little less than a month after the first Texas-funded bus arrived. On June 14th, carrying 42 migrants, another bus carrying 41 migrants pulled into LA on July 1st. The 118 migrants who have been sent to California are a small fraction of the 22,000 whom Texas have bused to Democrat-run cities including New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Denver, and Washington. Abbott has used the buses to protest Democrat policies on immigration, often dropping passengers off at locations sure to create media spectacles. For instance, on Vice President Kamala Harris's lawn on a freezing Christmas Eve night. However, many immigrants have eagerly boarded the buses. For those with few resources, a free bus ride to reunite with family in cities distant from the border is a welcome offer. That's why in LA, as well as other destination cities, nonprofit groups have decided to collaborate with the program, albeit begrudgingly, though committed to getting migrants relocation assistance and helping communities prepare to welcome them. The aid groups are loath to support Abbott's political protest. And again, I say, who says it's a political protest? You, the LA Times? These people are eager to get on these buses, and nobody's forcing them either. There's no round them up, stick them on the bus and put them in camps. That's Democrat policy. That's leftoid policy. Instead, we have a series of people who are said, hey, you want to go to LA? You want to go to a sanctuary city where they're actively blocking federal agents from coming after you? Or do you want to stay here where if the federales don't come after you, I will? I like the fact, by the way, that the city of Brownsville coordinated with LA. That has been one of my complaints with the program. Yes, it's hilarious to drop 15 people on Martha's Vineyard and see them freak out and panic because they know that they had no warning about it. But realistically, they should have called Martha's Vineyard and say, hey, you voted for these policies. We've got 15 people coming out here to spend some time with you. Be prepared, get some food, get some shelter, because we're going to send these people up to you. Show us how it's done. Show us how to take care of these people. And that should be the same in DC, in Chicago. Not just drop them off at a bus stop and say, good luck. So I do like the fact that Brownsville said, hey, LA, we sent this bus out here for you. Get some people up there to wait for them. Because then they still get the people. They've got a welcome mat out there, and they can start to find a way to do this. Because again, they keep telling us that it's so easy to take care of migrants and we shouldn't be complaining about it. That's what they tell us. So they should be happy to be taking all these people, not loath to support Abbott's political protest. Gavin Newsom getting into the news on this one from the Daily Mail. Gavin Newsom accused of political hypocrisy. Not for the first time and probably not for the last time either. Over DeSantis and Abbott lawsuit threat, as it was revealed his administration was caught dumping child migrants in other counties when he was mayor of San Francisco. Ooh. From Josh Boswell. Gavin Newsom has called for a criminal investigation of the Republicans flying migrants into Vice President's home and Martha's Vineyard, despite having his own controversial past of dumping criminal immigrants on others, critics claim. Newsom was caught in a scandal in 2008 as mayor of San Francisco when it emerged his admin was shipping foreign-born juvenile migrants to San Bernardino without local leaders' knowledge. Ooh. The policy of shipping migrants to other counties, dubbed dumping, led to an uproar at the time. Now Newsom calls for probes of Republican governors Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott over flying migrants to Democrat areas, is prompting politicians and former California government officials to accuse him of hypocrisy. Like going out to the French Laundry while you have the rest of Los Angeles County closed. Ooh. He's no stranger to transporting individuals. He doesn't want his communities said California State Assemblyman and former Riverside District Attorney Bill Asaley. But the minute someone else does it, a Republican does it, it's got to be a national crime. I think it's political hypocrisy. And again, oddly enough, not the last time that this man is going to be accused of political hypocrisy. Jim Bradley, Republican candidate for California Senate in 2024, also slammed the governor as hypocritical. He's calling out the GOP governors when he is guilty of doing the exact same thing in 2008, Bradley told DailyMail.com. Ooh. Got him. Oop, I had my stories in the wrong order. I don't want this one here until all the way down here, because we got to talk more about this. Texas troopers told to push back migrants into Rio Grande in order not to give water amid soaring temperatures, report says. From Rachel Clark, Ashley Killow, and Sarah Moon, and Priscilla Alvarez. Big if true, by the way. Email shared with CNN by the Department of Public Safety detail a trooper medic expressing concerns to a supervisor over the inhumane treatment of migrants along the border in Eagle Pass, Texas. The Department of Homeland Security and the DOJ are in ongoing talks about what action be taken against Texas amid concerns over Texas Governor Greg Abbott's months-long operation along the U.S. southern border, according to a source familiar with the discussions. In the email, the troopers and medics were given orders to push people back into the water to go to Mexico, and they were also ordered not to give water to the migrants. The emails report of weekly events and operational concerns from June 24th to July 1st. While the officer worked as a trooper medic, the email was first reported by the Houston Chronicle on Monday. In one 7-hour period late last month, according to the email, 2 medics from the State Department of Public Safety said they treated a 4-year-old girl passed out in 100-degree heat after Texas National Guard personnel pushed the group she was in back towards Mexico. A man with a significant laceration on his leg suffered when he tried to rescue his child from razor wire placed in a deterrence buoy in the Rio Grande. A 15-year-old boy with a broken leg suffered when he tried to cross a more dangerous part of the river across from the buoys. And a 19-year-old woman trapped in a wire having a miscarriage. The next day, according to the email, the troopers got reports of a mother and 2 children trying to cross the river in an area without wire. The woman and 1 child were grabbed after being underwater for about a minute. Both were pronounced dead at a hospital. The body of the other child was recovered later. In another shift, the medics said they found 120 people camping out, including nursing babies and other young children, exhausted, hungry, and tired after a day when the temperature reached 108 degrees in the shade. The medics questioned an order to push them back into the river towards Mexico, as they thought it was not the correct thing to do, and one that could have led to a risk of drowning. They were told to leave the area, the trooper wrote in an email. Now, if true, we need to have a conversation about this.
I need some music.
While there is no... How do I want to put this? There's no implied necessity to take care of somebody from another nation who is forcibly trying to enter your borders. There comes to a point, especially when medics are involved, who have taken the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm and to attempt to help whenever they can. And if they're coming into these facilities, you're in a position where you can just throw them back onto a truck and ship them back across. Now, obviously the pregnancy tour ones who are coming over to try to have the anchor baby on this side of the river, there's another conversation to be had, and I'm not in public office to where I can tell you what the answer is to that. And I understand that. But there is a difference between defending your borders and actively putting people in danger. There is a difference there. I don't agree with bringing them all into the country and letting them all pass freely, but nor do I agree to pushing them back into the river where the razor wire is. There's got to be somewhere in between there, somewhere. Something that we do, shove them back in the river and let them fend for themselves, or let them unfettered into the country. There are two sides of the coin. You got to be somewhere over, maybe still this way, keep them far away from just enter the country unfettered, but not all the way out here either. However, with the propaganda around Newsom and Abbott sending these migrants out to other parts of the country, I also don't completely feel that this is true. Instead, I feel that this is mostly propagandized. This is one of those with the evil orange man effect, that this person has to be evil no matter what. That I would actually need to see this to believe it. Boombox says, change its names to Migrants Vineyard. From KHOU 11, Governor Abbott's office issued a statement contradicting claims of inhumane treatment at the border. From Stephanie Whitfield and John Diaz, the Texas Department of Public Safety is responding to reports about the treatment of people attempting to cross the border illegally. Emails released by the DPS late Monday detailed the need to review safety measures after reports that migrants were hurt by razor wire. The emails were released after a report by the Houston Chronicle that revealed details about the inhumane treatment of people attempting to cross the border. Troopers at the border were told to push children into the river and to go back to Mexico in order to deny them drinking water, according to the report. The newspaper also claimed to have obtained an email from a trooper medic to supervisor that expressed concerns about how they were treating people. DPS Communications Chief Travis Considine responded to the report on Twitter saying, troopers give migrants water, they treat the wounds, they save them from drowning, they also do everything possible to deter them from risking their lives in the first place. Considine also shared screenshots of an email with DPS Director Steve McCraw that was sent to his chain of command calling for a comprehensive review of the procedures from a medical perspective. In the email, McCraw wrote, the smugglers care not if the migrants are injured, but we do. We must take all necessary measures to mitigate the risk to them. The report escalated tensions between Abbott and the federal government over the border security measures being implemented by the state on Tuesday. Abbott's office sent a statement contradicting the report. No orders or directions have been given under Operation Lone Star that would compromise the lives of those attempting to cross the border illegally, it said. Texas congressional Democrats are speaking out about the alleged incidences too. Pushing kids back into the water, putting razor wire around buoys to create drowning devices, Rep. Greg Cesar said. Other organizations are also speaking out about it. Are they really trying to make it safer, or are they trying to make it more unsafe for people to cross? FIEL Executive Director Cesar Espinoza said. Abbott's full statement says Texas is deploying every tool and strategy to deter and repel illegal crossings between ports of entry, as Biden's dangerous open borders policies entice migrants from over 150 countries to risk their lives entering the country illegally. The absence of razor wire and other deterrent strategies encourages migrants to make unsafe and illegal crossings between ports of entry, while making the job of the Texas National Guard soldiers and DPS troopers more dangerous and difficult. Biden has unleashed a chaos on the border that's unsustainable, and we have a constitutional duty to respond to this unprecedented crisis. I would like to see if they are going to attempt to cross, to do it at a port of entry, obviously. But this also is unsustainable somewhere. Again, there's got to be somewhere in the middle. Still maybe leaning over here a little bit. that we can come to at some point here. From Fox News, going into the Biden side of things. This is an op-ed. The opinions expressed in here are the opinions of Chad Wolf and not the opinions of Fox News, Contemporary, Turns of Pages Productions, or your host, J. Edgar. Biden is cooking the books at the border, from Chad Wolf. When Biden was vice president, the Obama admin changed the way the DHS counted deportations, making it appear that they were enforcing immigration law while trying to negotiate a mass amnesty bill. They padded these numbers, including the number of recent unlawful border crossers who were returned after being in the U.S. Border Patrol custody. This inflated a count that historically included only illegal aliens removed from the American communities by ICE. Unfortunately, Biden admin is now cooking the books on unlawful entries, but is doing so to make the numbers look smaller and try to convince the American people and the media that their border security strategy is working. If you believe the admin, border encounters remain low after Title 42 ended on May 11th, but don't fall for this disinformation. The humanitarian and security crisis at the southern border is ongoing, and overall illegal immigration problem is now far worse than the border numbers show. Here's the reality the Biden admin is hiding from you and the media are failing to report accurately. First, it's critical to understand when the DHS claims unlawful entries between the ports of entry are down, they're describing only the illegal aliens apprehended by the Border Patrol agents intentionally omitted in their communications to the American people or the number of aliens found inadmissible at the ports of entry by Office of Field Operations officers. Under U.S. immigration law, it is irrelevant which border officers intercept illegal aliens attempting to enter the U.S. because they're in violation of the same provision of the law. However, the Biden admin sees it differently and considers only illegal aliens encountered by Border Patrol agents are breaking the law. Breaking the law, breaking the law. Consistent with this flawed philosophy, the admin's new border strategy announced in January encourages illegal aliens to show up at ports of entry after scheduling an appointment through a CBP One app. More than 99% of illegal aliens who used the app between April and January were waved through despite lacking a visa. This process is not discouraging illegal immigration, but instead is diverting it to a controlled environment. In doing so, it spares the admin the negative optics of tens of thousands of illegal aliens flooding the border. Nevertheless, the result is the same, the mass release of illegal aliens into American communities. The combined 204,561 encounters in May were only slightly lower than the roughly 211,000 in April, and marked the second highest number in May ever recorded, trailing only May 2022. Border encounters are hardly remaining low, as DHS claims the key difference is where they're showing up. As the 35,317 inadmissible aliens at the ports of entry in May 2023 is the highest monthly level ever recorded at ports of entry and more than double the 16,766 inadmissible aliens in May of 2022. Since this new policy went into effect in January, DHS has averaged more than 29,000 inadmissible aliens each month. By comparison, the highest number of inadmissible aliens at the ports of entry in a single month during the Trump admin was about 12,000. Second, the southern border encounters data does not account for the approximately 30,000 illegal aliens from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela that DHS is unlawfully allowing into American communities every month under the DHS Secretary's parole authority. Immigration parole is intended to be a very narrow authority to allow an inadmissible alien into the U.S. temporarily, but only for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit, such as to receive an emergency medical treatment or to assist law enforcement in a prosecution. The current categorical parole program satisfies none of the statutory criteria. And, I mean, realistically, when we look at this, I've never had a doubt that the Biden admin was cooking the books on some of this stuff. Because they need to make it look like the border's like something's happening on the border. That they're doing something well. and that the border czar is actually doing something other than just not going to the border. That's our border news for the day from CBS News. Appeals court halts order barring Biden admin communications with social media companies, from Melissa Quinn. Now, this was breaking on Friday, and of course, with all the news from over the weekend, we did not get to this yesterday. Appeals, I read the headline already. From Melissa Quinn. A federal appeals court on Friday temporarily paused a lower court order that limited communications between top Biden admin officials and social media companies about content posted to their platforms. A 3-judge panel for the Fifth Circuit Court granted the DOJ's request to put on hold the July 4th preliminary injunction from U.S. District Judge Terry Doughty. While legal proceedings continue, it also agreed to expedite the admin's appeal. The temporary admin stay will remain in place until further orders of the court, according to the brief order. The DOJ turned to the Fifth Circuit for relief after it asked Doughty last week to halt his own order. While it pursued an appeal, Doughty, appointed by former President Trump, declined to do so in a 13-page ruling rejected by the government's assertion that his injunction swept too broadly and threatened to chill lawful conduct. Although this preliminary injunction involves numerous agencies, it's not as broad as it appears, Doughty wrote. It only prohibits something the defendants have no legal right to do so: contacting social media companies for the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner the removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech posted on social media platforms. So isn't that wonderful? The Biden admin goes judge shopping and now has free reign to go to Twitter and Facebook and the rest of Meta and say, hey, we don't like what this person is saying. Ban this person. Suppress these terms. Suppress this in your algorithm. Otherwise, we're going to make life very, very difficult for you. And you wouldn't want life to be difficult, would it? Now, the initial order and the initial defense was that they were only doing it to come back out and do things for law enforcement. But, I mean, we've got a weaponized DOJ who is investigating parents protesting at a PTA meeting. And you want these people to be in contact with social media for posts that they post publicly? And you should always be careful with what you post on social media to begin with. You should. You should be a lot more careful than a lot of people are. Because anything that you say out there can and will be used against you in a court of law. Whether it's for something you got picked up for in a speeding ticket, or whether it be something far in the future, or something you directly said, they will find a way to come back out and use this against you. You should always be careful with what you say on there. And sadly, again, so many people aren't. I'm going to do this one from the Blaze, and then I think we're going to do this one and the one after that, and I think we're going to call it a night for the night. We had a really, really heavy show tonight. A lot of Trump stuff, a lot of election stuff, and a lot of stuff I didn't necessarily agree with. But let's do this one here, and then a subsequent opinion on what's happening in the Ukraine and Russia. Then we'll do rules of acquisition and head out of here for the night. From the Blaze. CNN host gets upset when Cornel West refuses to accept his narrative about the Ukraine. It's just a fact. And of course, it's Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper became defensive on Monday when third-party presidential candidate Dr. Cornel West refused to accept his narrative about the Ukraine war. Last week, West criticized NATO expansionism and characterized the Ukraine war as a proxy war. Between the US and Russia, his criticism has been framed as pro-Putin. I mean, where's the lie? We've been told on and off, and mostly on, since the Donald came down the escalator, that Russia was our greatest geopolitical threat. so much of a geopolitical threat that they installed their puppet, Donald Trump, in the White House. And we must do everything to stop them that we can. And now we are supplying weapons upon weapons and money upon money and sometimes troops, but we don't talk about that in polite company. Sometimes troops, but we don't talk about that in polite company. To the Ukraine to go back out and fight Russia until every last Ruski is dead. So where's the lie that it's a proxy war? Let us not be deceived. NATO is an expanding instrument of U.S. global power that provoked Russia into a criminal invasion. An occupation of Ukraine, this proxy war between the American Empire and the Russian Federation could lead us into World War III. We must stop the war and... Let's read the rest of this here. We must stop the war and war crimes, including cluster bombs used by all parties, and embarked on diplomatic talks that should lead to a just peace. As the great W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in 1945, I seem to see an outlined world war based on the suppression of Asia and the strangling of Russia. The Democratic Party is the party of war, and Wall Street targeting Russia and China. Let us save our democracy and world by dismantling U.S. militarism at home as in cop cities and abroad, as Martin Luther King Jr. painfully reminded us. And Jeff Storobinski gives us the back and forth between Dr. West and Anderson Cooper. So let's have a listen.
Party candidate Cornel West, who joins us now. Dr. West, appreciate you being with us. It's good to see you.
It's always a blessing to see you, and I salute your two precious gifts from heaven.
Thank
Brother
you.
Sebastian, Brother Wyatt. Yes, indeed.
They're doing well. Thank you. I want to ask you, Senator Manchin up in New Hampshire tonight, he seems to be testing the waters there. He says the parties are too far to the left and to the right. What do you think of his politics?
Well, I just read the pamphlet Common Sense, and my God, they had the audacity to rename that after the great Thomas Paine's revolutionary pamphlet of January 10th, 1976, that was critical of all forms of hierarchy in the name.
Okay, this is a 15-minute clip. We're going to do the play-by-play of this one. I just saw that out there. So we're going to go with the Cliff Notes instead. West reaffirmed that position in his interview with Cooper. The people of Ukraine right now who are suffering, and I'm in deep solidarity with their suffering, he said, they're being caught between this proxy war between the American Empire and the Russian Federation. That's when the interview began to sour because Cooper quickly registered his umbrage with West's position, arguing Western intervention in Ukraine to stop Russia is essentially a moral imperative. I just spoke to the foreign minister of Ukraine, Cooper told West. I think if you said to him that you're standing with the people of Ukraine in solidarity, you're saying that they are just victims in this proxy war, he would say you're out of your mind. Well, he is paid to say that, so do keep that in mind. Like those geeks over on Twitter that love to sniff Biden's farts. They're paid to have that position. Stopping Russian President Putin is such a moral imperative that without Western intervention, Putin will continue to slaughter people, Cooper argued, citing Russia's carpet bombing of Grozny in the First Chechen War. But West refused to budge. He responded to the barbarity and a tactic of empires and affirmed the Ukrainian people are victims, but reasserted his position that Russia was provoked. There's no doubt that the Ukrainian people are being treated in a barbaric way, he said, but in the context is one which that did not have to be if the expansion of NATO, and NATO is an arm of the American global power network, is just a fact. Cooper then took issue with West for allegedly wanting Ukraine to compromise with Russia. Cooper framed his critique by suggesting compromise is bad, unfair, and not the correct moral position. I want peace for my Ukrainian brothers and sisters, West shot back, and I don't want World War III. West concluded the interview by noting that Biden's decision to call up 3,000 reservists and potentially deploy them to Europe resembles the U.S. move to send thousands of military advisors to South Vietnam in 1962. And of course, we all know how that ended. More and more military personnel in Vietnam before it was a full-scale war. That we lost, by the way. And you know what the worst part of this article is? I'm gonna come right out and say it. I'm gonna name the elephant in the room. Glenn Beck would be in a massive hurry if this was a Republican administration wanting to go back out and invade somewhere in the Middle East, other than Afghanistan, of course, because that's politically unpopular to go into. But if Johnny Republican, the spiritual successor to W, said, "Hey man, we got to go into Persia. I mean Iran, because they might go after our greatest ally, Israel," Glenn Beck would be pounding the war drums to have his proxy war over there. That's the worst part of this. I protested Bush and thought that I was a Democrat because I was anti-war. And a lot of the people who protested Bush with me, including some of them I could name by name if I really wanted to, are pounding the war drums to bring us into the Ukraine right now. I'm still anti-war. The rest of you sold out. And our last one here, an opinion on the situation that they have over there from Black in the Empire, says, reminder, they told us sanctions would send Russia to the Stone Age. Their military leaders are incompetent, soldiers are untrained, and weapons were inferior. That's what they told us. That is absolutely what they told us. Now, over 500 days later, and $113 billion of our money being stolen from us, the entire West cannot get Russia out of the Ukraine. Americans are the biggest suckers on the planet. Just remember, WMDs. Would not be surprised actually to hear that come out of some politician's mouth. Oh, Putin's got weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons he's going to use on his own people. If we don't go over there and do something. And with that, we will conclude our news portion of the news this evening. And our closing segment, as we always do on Tuesdays, is the rules of acquisition. When I say we always do, but we're running out of rules of acquisition. I hate to tell people. We might have to go find something else in geekdom to do on Tuesdays. But every Tuesday, we review the fact that the Ferengi are an alien species in the Star Trek continuity, both in Alpha and Beta canons, whose religious fervor revolves around capitalism, especially in how they treat other species around the galaxy. To follow these rules that we have laid out in front of us gives you the ability to go to the divine treasury. And your piety to these rules gives you the social currency to be able to bid for a better next life. Yes, the Ferengi believe in reincarnation. Every Tuesday we go through one of these rules, talk about what it means in the show, determine whether it can be used in real life, and determine how it can be used in real life. And as I always say with this, surprisingly enough, with as much of an avowed communist as Roddenberry is, and by the way, I watched an interview on why Enterprise failed, where Brandon Braga, the showrunner for both Enterprise and Deep Space Nine, was so determined when Roddenberry died that he wanted to keep the spirituality of Roddenberry alive in the series. And as communistic as Roddenberry was, these rules are actually good rules for capitalism and acquisition. I've been surprised reading through this, and I was tangentially familiar with some of these already because I'm a big Deep Space Nine fan. That is my favorite series in the entire continuity. At how positive these actually are for capitalism. But we will read into the rules of acquisition. We are into the 200s. I don't remember where we left off, but we are into the 200s. 208th. This is a good one for the politics that we analyze over here, actually. The 208th rule of acquisition. Sometimes the more though the only thing more dangerous than a question is the answer. This is from a Deep Space Nine episode, Ferengi Love Songs. And this, if I remember correctly, Ferengi Love Songs is deep into the Dominion War, where propaganda was going up on both sides. Let me just check where this season was. Yeah, season 5. So this was right at the start of the Dominion War. No, I think that's about the middle, now that I think about it. So definitely a situation where propaganda is out there, people are on edge, and people are wondering what is going to happen and what is going to come next. So, what do we think about the 208th rule of acquisition? Well, realistically, there are situations like that. Now, people can come out and question, we'll use the prosecution of Trump as a motive. People can come out and question the motives of the DOJ and the Biden admin and Jack Smith and a host of other things that are involved in the prosecution that we're watching right now. And people very well will question them for as well as they are. And people will be... they'll be called traitors to the Republic. They'll be called evil. They'll be called bad for asking the question. Because you're questioning the faith in our government that we need to have right now for whatever reason. You're questioning the social cohesion and our ability to hold people to account when they've done wrong. Okay. And as much as I would like to, by the way, get to the bottom of this, I'm going to tell you right off the bat that if it comes out and it gets proven that the Biden admin was going to war using the DOJ as a political weapon against the Donald, or any political enemy for that matter, it's not going to be just the fact that the DOJ goes in and hauls Biden out in cuffs and the rest of the admin and everybody else out in cuffs. That is a part of their power structure. That will, if it ever comes out and becomes public, be one of the last straws of our republic before there's an all-out war. And there are going to be people on the other side that do, even if you're shown, it's shown beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that Biden used this way, that they're going to defend him no matter what. This is a situation, as much as I think that it's important for us to get to the bottom of it, this is a situation where the only thing more dangerous than the question of whether or not he's doing that would be the answer. And politically, and even financially too, our situation in our society is littered with examples of this. So that is one thing to keep in mind as we go. That's part of the reason that so many people stay asleep for as long as they do and never question the narrative, or as some of us in the political sphere call them, remain blue-pilled. Because it is so dangerous to actually get the answer, that they don't want the answer. They want to be told everything is okay and the government actually has their best interests at heart. So definitely a good one, especially to come on a day like today. I didn't plan this way either, by the way. That just happened to coincide. And I think that coincided perfectly. And with that, we are done. We're out of here. Interesting the way that some of these things just work out sometimes. Maybe it's divine intervention, maybe it's God putting a hand in it, or maybe it just happens to be a massive coincidence. I don't know. But that's that worked out perfectly. Very happy to see that one. And with that, we're out of here for the night. Thank you, Spartan, for the Quark sticker. Love that pops up right here at the end of this. And let's throw some outro music up and let's head out of here. Thank you to Stephen Ingramus again for the outro music there. That fridge is on its last leg, I swear. Alright. Well, we gotta pull this music out of here. All right. With that, we're out of here. Thanks, everybody who stuck by. Had a good time. I hope that everybody brings one more person in this week. So find a person, share this out, and get us in here for live. Otherwise, check us out on demand over on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and Spotify. Go check us out on all those platforms where you can take us on the go. Spotify link for the show will be up in a couple hours. So we'll get to that. I'm going to go have some dinner tonight. So enjoy your night. Go hug your family and your friends. Have a great night. Get some rest. And get ourselves back to work. We'll be back here tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time, for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to see what the fallout is and what the speculation is as we go into our Thursday meeting with the grand jury in D.C. and see if this actually is an arrest and indictment. We'll see what happens there. This is going to be definitely some floating news. And have yourselves a good night, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next time over here on Contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.